I want to orient you all to why I chose to speak today on this topic. I am a person with lived experience of childhood trauma, mental health challenges, sexual assault, and domestic violence, and all of those things really intimately affected my well-being. And it wasn't until I joined various communities that held self-care as a right and something that must be practiced consistently that I finally started to feel an increased sense of well-being. So I feel really passionately about sharing these tools with others. And I do hope that whatever you are doing here today, you can just really be present with us here during this next hour and put down your work, just take a break for this hour and truly be here with us practicing self-care together. So today we'll start out just by talking about the different effects that stress has on our minds, our bodies, and our spirits. We'll then talk about how to build healthy habits and routines. Then we will discuss mindfulness and how it's more than just practicing yoga. And we'll get a little bit of experience practicing some self-care practices based in mindfulness, including some breath work, some chair yoga, some meditation, and if we have time, we'll do a body scan as well. And then there should be a little bit of time for questions and answers at the end as well. So first, to start things out, I'm curious how you are feeling right now. So looking at this picture of all these dogs, go ahead and vote in the poll which one describes how you are feeling most at this moment. And it might help you to check in with yourself by maybe closing down your eyes to just think about how your body's feeling, how your emotions are, how your mind is it clear, racing? And then choosing one of those 9 dogs there. Personally, at the moment, I'm feeling a little bit somewhere between 4 and 8. It's a nice sunny day, but also that heat coming through makes me a little tired at the end of the day. All right, so it looks like we've got a wide range of feelings. We're all across the board, but a lot of us are having an okay day. Some of us are tired, but everyone's in a different spot, and that's all right. Let's see how we feel at the end of today's presentation. So let's start by talking about how stress affects us. So what is stress? These definitions come from the American Institute of Stress. The first definition just of stress in general is any change that causes physical, emotional, or psychological strain. So this means that our ability to cope with something does not meet the demands of what we're being asked to do. Toxic stress is stress that's prolonged, frequent, and or intense. So stress in itself is not necessarily harmful. In fact, there are some kinds of stress that can be really helpful. It can even be motivating at times. But when that stress goes on for a very long time or is really, really extreme, that is called toxic stress, and that is harmful to us. Then we have trauma, and trauma is something that happens that is too soon, too fast, or too much for our mind and our body to process. It's often something that happens in a single instance, but as we know with the COVID-19 pandemic, trauma can sometimes be something that happens over a period of time or something that's recurring over and over again. Then we have compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue is the emotional residue or strain of exposure to working with those suffering from the consequences of traumatic events. So I know a lot of our audience here today work in schools. Many of us are mental health professionals. Some of us are healthcare workers. All of those professions are susceptible to compassion fatigue because we are working directly with folks who are experiencing something really challenging, perhaps even traumatic. And then we have burnout. Burnout is a cumulative process marked by the emotional exhaustion and withdrawal associated with increased workload and institutional stress. This is not trauma related. So this is something that has to do with leadership and systems and basically having too much work for any all of the employees to do. And this is something that leaders have to take control of and try to find a way to bring a balance to everybody's workload so that no one's feeling so burnt out they actually leave the field, which we have seen a lot of healthcare workers and mental health care workers reach that point of burnout during the pandemic and exit this field of work. So what happens to our bodies when we're experiencing stress? I find it really helpful for folks to learn about the way that stress affects their bodies, because then they can start to recognize it in the moment a little bit easier. So our central nervous system helps bring us to this state of balance, the state of homeostasis. And that's represented by this light gray middle line there. Our bodies like to be not too excited, not too relaxed, but somewhere in the middle. That's where all of our organs and our brain and our heart, all of it's happiest when we're kind of right there in the middle. But we have this window of tolerance where our bodies can withstand very exciting or some acute stress that ends after a period of time easily, and can also withstand those super relaxed states of being without falling into a depressive state. So the top line where it says energized and the relaxed line at the bottom, that's called our window of tolerance, what our bodies can easily respond to. And every day we have ups and downs. That's normal. We're not going to stay at that perfectly chill, right in the middle state of being all the time. We're going to encounter challenges and reach closer to that energized state of being. And we're also going to have times where we're able to just relax and take a break and slow down closer to that relaxed way of being. But when we experience a trauma or have a stressful event, sometimes our body's stress response system goes outside that window of tolerance. So let's say something stressful happens in traffic. You're in a traffic jam and you get into a car accident at the beginning of the day. So you're up above that window of tolerance and you're feeling a sweaty palm, your heart is racing, and it's harder to come back down all the way to that state of homeostasis or balance. So you might actually stay up here closer to the energized point of being. And then the next time that you get stressed, perhaps you go into work and find that there are 100 emails for you to answer. Maybe it's harder for you to come back down into your window of tolerance. You stay stressed for a longer period of time. And then maybe you come back down and you're getting closer to that state of balance, but another stressful situation occurs and it's not only do you bounce back up more easily, but your response might be a little bit more exaggerated than if you were in a relaxed state of being. So that's what happens when our bodies get stuck on. That stress response cycle is not able to be completed, and therefore we kind of get stuck in that energized way of being. And I love to tell folks about the way that animals finish that stress response cycle. It's very rare for animals to be traumatized by a single event because they are able to, I'm sorry, if you're annotating, can you please refrain from doing that? And Ingrid, if you're able to change the settings, that would be great. Sorry, so if animals experience a stressful event, they will simply shake it off. They will shake their bodies, and that releases all of that stored up cortisol in their bodies that are keeping us at this heightened state of being. So I would invite you right now, if you would like, if you have a little stress on you that you need to shake off, you can turn your camera off if that makes you feel more comfortable. You can do it while you're seated or stand up, but just raise your hands up and just shake it off, shake your head, just shake it off. And sometimes that simple act of putting a little movement can help us feel a little better. Now, us humans have adapted this into dance. That's something that's really fun way to get stress out of our bodies, is to put on a little music and dance around. Now let's talk about the specific things within our central nervous system that are affected by trauma and toxic stress. So what we just talked about was really more in our limbic system, the trauma response area of our central nervous system, but there's many more things that are affected. So trauma and toxic stress, they affect our prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain that's right at the front of our brain that helps us with all of our higher order thinking, our executive functioning. So things like decision making, planning, prioritizing, all of that's affected by toxic stress and trauma. And I'm sure you can probably relate when you've had some moments in your life where you've been very, very stressed. It's just harder to make decisions. It's harder to make the right choice. It's harder to watch movies that have subtitles, for example. It's harder to read a book about a nonfiction topic that's very complex because those executive functioning skills are impaired. Another thing that happens is our amygdala is overstimulated. So our fight, flight, or freeze response is like a hair trigger. That's what we were talking about on the slide before when I said if something stressful happens and you're already stressed, instead of being able to use your emotional regulation skills and calm yourself down, you might overreact or get more upset than you normally would if you weren't so stressed. Another part of the brain that's affected is the hippocampus. And studies have shown that the hippocampus in folks who have experienced a lot of trauma or toxic stress is not working optimally. So the way that we store and access our memories is impaired. So you might be more forgetful. It might take you longer to recall certain words. I know that happens to me a lot when I am stressed. Another way that our brain's affected, or our central nervous system is affected, is the vagus nerve gets disrupted. So the vagus nerve is this really interesting nerve that goes all the way from the bottom of your brain stem down your spine, and it wraps around all of our major organs. So it regulates the entire central nervous system, trying to bring everything back to that state of homeostasis, that balance state in the middle. And when we're stressed, it doesn't work quite as well. Thankfully, research shows us that mindfulness practices like yoga, breath work, and meditation also affect the central nervous system, but in a positive way. So there have been studies that have shown that regularly practicing yoga and meditation can actually increase executive functioning skills. They can also help regulate the amygdala, make your hippocampus more functional, and help regulate the vagus nerve. And research has also shown that the people who have the largest effects from toxic stress and trauma on their central nervous system actually get the largest benefits from practicing mindfulness as well. And I want to acknowledge that there are lots of different traumas and stress. And one way that entire populations of people are traumatized is through race-based trauma and stress. And there have been some great studies and great work done on specific cultural humility-based ways of using mindfulness with various populations. And this book has been recommended to me by other folks who are mindfulness practitioners of color. It's called Restorative Yoga for Ethnic and Race-Based Stress and Trauma by Gail Parker. So I would highly encourage you to check that out if you yourself are someone who's experienced race-based trauma, or if you work with populations where that occurs. So now let's talk about how to build healthy habits and routines into our lives so we can practice these things. I mentioned at the beginning that for myself, I wasn't able to really reach a sense of true well-being until I joined communities that held me accountable for self-care practices. And now that I have moved to a new city, I'm really having to rely on my healthy habits and routines as I try to find a new community to join to continue that accountability. So here are some ways that I really like to build those habits. So research does show that having a normal rhythm to your day improves mood and cognitive functioning, and it decreases depression and other mental health challenges. So creating a life with rhythm can be done by slowly changing your behaviors step by step. You might be setting yourself up for failure if you try to change your entire life overnight. So take it in baby steps. You can start by creating some rituals for yourself. That might be taking your time in the morning to sip some coffee or tea while reflecting on the previous day. Maybe that's doing a meditation after lunch just before returning to your desk. Maybe it's enjoying a hot bath at the end of a long day, or climbing into some special pajamas that bring you comfort and joy. Instead of just mindlessly going about your day every day, which is really common when we're under a lot of stress and pressure, maybe take some time to think of a few small moments that you can make special for yourself. And then once you've identified some rituals that really bring you joy and enhance your life, you can make them routines by doing them at the same time or around the same time each day. Or if it's a whole day routine, you could do it around the same time each month. So one example might be a family ritual of having a phone-free dinner conversation. That can become a routine when you've done it enough times that no one needs a reminder. And later we'll talk about specific mindful habits that you and your family can develop together. So when you start to weave these routines into your daily life and no one needs reminders anymore, they then become habits. And when that happens, you'll start to find this increased sense of rhythm that can increase your sense of joy and peace. Now, I love this quote by Annie Dillard. How we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives. What we do with this hour and that one is what we are doing. So, right now, I want you to take a moment to reflect on the rhythms, the habits, the routines, and the rituals of your current life. We are in control of many aspects of our lives because we're in control to an extent of what we put on our calendars. So, right now, whether it's just closing your eyes and reflecting, or actually opening up your calendar on your phone, your computer, your paper calendar, really imagine what you have done this past week. What occupies most of your time? I like to use color coding in my calendar because it helps me better see the percentage of time I'm spending on work, wellness, leisure, and growth. You might find that a useful tool. Sometimes it's quite shocking when we actually look at our calendars and add up the amount of time we're spending on various things. But just do remember that whatever you're spending the most time on, that's where most of your energy is going. And reallocating your time can be one of the most impactful self-care practices that you do. So I would encourage you to really think carefully about what you value most and how you can get more of that time into your life. One way to do that is to find your well-being formula. So everyone's is going to look a little bit different. These are some of the most common ones that help folks find that state of balance in their lives. The first one is a definite need for everyone. Figuring out how much sleep you need. It's a range, so trying to find your specific magic number. Thinking about food that makes you feel good. So I don't say food that is super healthy here because it's important to eat healthy foods, and we'll talk about that later. But it's also important not to restrict yourself to only eating salads and vegetables and fruits, because food gives us pleasure and joy. And it's important to have that in our lives. So thinking about the food that when you eat it, your body feels good. I have a friend who's a dietitian, and her whole thing is intuitive eating. If you haven't read up about intuitive eating, I really encourage you to do so. It's when we listen to what our body wants and we give our body those things. And when you are eating intuitively, you're usually not going to overeat. Sure, you might have a cookie after lunch and some ice cream after dinner, but that's okay. That's what your body needed that day. And maybe the next day, you're going to eat only fruits and vegetables. Our bodies are really good at telling us what we need. Another thing for me is once I started being a little more mindful about my eating, I started to recognize which foods gave me stomach aches or which foods made me feel lethargic. And a lot of those foods were foods I really loved, so I didn't want to give them up, but I would just think more intentionally about, okay, I had, 3 servings of white flour this week, so maybe next week I'm going to cut back and not have as much of that white flour because that affects me personally in a way that doesn't make me feel good. Another part of your formula for well-being might be finding that perfect balance for you of how much time you're spending in relationship with others and how much time you're spending alone. So figuring out how often you want to do things and then looking at your calendar and making sure you block off time for both. A lot of the time alone time is what we leave off, so I really like to actually put that on my calendar when I'm going to go for a walk by myself or spend some time reading. I'll put that on my calendar so that I hold myself accountable and I don't plan something with others at that time. And then the last part of my formula is activities that bring me pleasure, because experiencing joy is a really important part of taking care of ourselves. So that might be taking a bath, that might be eating dessert, that might be going for a walk in nature. It doesn't have to be anything that costs money. A lot of self care things out in the world make us think that it has to be manicures and massages and spending all kinds of money to make ourselves better. But most of what we need is freely available out there as long as we seek it out. So now I'm sure you're looking at this and you're saying, oh, great. Sure. When am I going to have the time to do all of this all the time so that I can find my sense of well being? Well, obviously, we're going to have to make some compromises and do a little balancing. So, the way I like to think about it is if the first week of the month I, had a lot of activity going on and didn't sleep as much, and I ate some pretty unhealthy foods because I was doing a lot of socializing, no alone time, but I got a lot of pleasure out of what I was doing, then maybe the next week I might want to spend less time out and about and eat a little bit healthier foods and get a little extra sleep. So we might not always be able to find that perfect balance of our formula every single time, but we can just keep it in mind and it makes us more intentional about the activities that we're doing to take care of ourselves. So now let's talk about mindfulness. I use mindfulness as a self-care tool because I do feel like it literally saved my life. I was really having trouble regulating my emotions before I found mindfulness, and it helped me not only take care of myself, but also be a better community member and be able to help others learn how to regulate their emotions as well. So, what is mindfulness? I do want to recognize that mindfulness is a practice that has been done across the world for centuries and millennia. And it's really only been popularized in the West in the past few decades, but it's a very ancient technology that many cultures have woven into their religions and educational system. And we have this definition here from John Kabat-Zinn, who is an American scholar who is credited with popularizing mindfulness in the US. And he says that it is paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. So there are just so many things that we can do with mindfulness. And I truly believe that the more we practice mindfulness, the easier it is for us to take care of ourselves. Because when we're paying attention to what our bodies and our hearts and our spirits want, and when we're doing that without placing any kind of judgment on it, it's a lot easier for us to give ourselves what we need and to give our communities what they need as well. So first, let's access mindfulness together by using the five senses. So I hope you've kept everything down. You haven't picked any work back up, but if you have, put it back down again and go ahead and find a comfortable seat. You can place your feet onto the ground. Your hands can be on your table or on your lap. And check in with your shoulders and just give them permission to release down. And we'll just take a deep breath in through our nose and let it out through our mouth. First, let's look around the room and ask ourselves what we see. You might notice colors or shapes. You might see different patterns or textures. Try to do this without judgment, not placing good or bad on anything. Just looking around. You might even look down at your own body. Next, take another deep breath in through your nose, out through your mouth, and truly listen. What do you hear? Might be sounds inside your home or office, maybe something right outside the window. Take another breath in through your nose, out through your mouth. What did you smell as you breathed in? Maybe there's something delicious cooking nearby, or a flower, tree outside the window. Take another breath. Let it out. Run your hands across your desk or table, maybe through your hair or across your shoulder, and truly notice what you feel. Textures, temperatures. Take one more breath in through your nose, out through your mouth. And if you have access to a drink or a snack, go ahead and take a sip or a bite. And notice what you taste. You can take one more breath in and out. And just like that, in just over a minute, we're fully in the present, fully grounded in our environment and our body. We're able to access that state of now. I also like to use the five senses in general to improve my self-care and well-being. I really believe in mise en place, which is this psychological concept that the state of your environment affects the state of your mental well-being. There has been research done to show that this is true. So if you have a cluttered area with lots of things everywhere, that can make your mind feel a little more cluttered. Of course, when we're doing some creative projects, that can be really powerful and encouraging. But when we are needing to focus or come back to a state of calm, it's helpful to have a clear space in front of us. So even if that's when you're practicing yoga or meditation, finding a space where there's not a lot of stuff around and you can have some emptiness and clarity. I also like to pay attention to what I have in the background when I'm working and able to listen to music. Music can be really powerful to change our mood. So if I'm having a stressful day, I might choose music that's a little more gentle and calm. If I need to be energized after a long day, I might turn on some really upbeat music and dance around for a little bit. But the things that we hear can really affect our well-being. I lived in New York City for many years, and when there was construction right outside of my window, that would really affect my concentration. So thinking about what we can do to adapt to our environment if we aren't able to make changes can also be helpful. Maybe getting some headphones to block out noises that aren't contributing to a positive well-being. I love to have candles or incense or room spray around to change the way that I'm feeling through smell. I also really love to have comfortable clothes. I stopped buying any clothes that are not comfortable because I really value feeling comfortable in my body. And then I always have fresh fruits around all the time because that's a food that makes me feel good. So I have a bowl of oranges right next to my desk so that I can grab it anytime that I want to taste something delicious. So also having chocolate around is really important for me. I like dark chocolate in the fridge whenever I need that taste of something sweet. So paying attention to your senses can help improve your well-being as well. So I do encourage you to think about what you can do to make small changes to just feel better wherever you are. There's lots of ways to practice mindfulness. The one that I always advise people who are new to mindfulness to try first is mindful walking. And this is as simple as walking outside your door and just starting to observe the things that you see, leaving the phone behind, no music, just going out on your own and narrating what you see in front of you. So walking around, there's a daisy, there's a purple car, there's a dog, there's a toddler. Just naming the things you see in front of you can help you come back to that present moment and feel grounded in your environment, which can reduce stress. Mindful eating is also really powerful. We talked a little bit about intuitive eating earlier, and there's also the idea of thinking about where your food comes from, being mindful about the processes that your food went through. And this can be helpful in teaching children gratitude as well, and thinking about gratitude for yourself, thinking back as you're eating about the grocery store employees who helped stock that food, the people at the factory who processed the food, the farmer who grew that food. That can help us feel a deeper sense of community and also might inform our choices when we're choosing where and how to buy food. We can also be very mindful during the process of eating. So instead of eating in front of the television or being on our phones while we're eating, just truly being there with our fork and our food, crunching, feeling all the textures, really paying attention to the various different tastes and flavors that can really enhance our enjoyment of what we're eating. Another way to practice mindfulness is when we're in conversation with others, how we're talking to other folks. So using active and reflective listening practices. That means using eye contact when we're speaking to another person. That helps mirror neurons travel between the two people in conversation, and it literally puts them on the same vibe. It helps people understand each other's emotional responses better when we're looking into each other's eyes. Also refraining from interruptions. It's human nature to want to start to pose our response in our mind while the other person is talking. But if we do that, we're missing out on what they're saying. And we might especially be missing out on how they're feeling. So trying not to do that, refraining from putting any kind of judgment on the other person, what the other person is saying. So not guessing at what their emotional response behind the words are, but just listening to the words themselves and hearing if they offer any emotional context to that. And then if you want to take that onto reflective listening, then you would repeat back what you believe you heard them say and get confirmation and keep that process going until you're both on the same page. So 90% of conflict is rooted in miscommunication. So when we do talk to each other more mindfully, it can really reduce conflict, which in turn will reduce stress. So teaching our students or our staff members, colleagues, employees teaching them these skills can be really powerful to improve a sense of community and cohesion and reduce that conflict. Mindful cooking is also really great. Cooking is a wonderful time to practice mindfulness, to get lost in the flow of something. Cleaning is another great way to get lost in the flow and be mindful. And then playing. If you have children or pets at home, this can be a normal, everyday part of your life, but maybe putting that phone down when you're engaged in playing with children or pets. Technoference is the idea that our phones actually interfere in how well we're able to connect with one another. And research has shown that when parents are engaged with their phone more often, levels of tantrums actually rise. So putting down our screens and fully being present in that act of playing is really powerful. Playing is very important to humans of all ages. So making time, no matter how old you are, to have fun is really important for your self-care and well-being. So I have a video that is linked in this slideshow, which you'll get later, about these 5 mindful habits. So I'm not going to go too in depth into them because I'd love to practice some other mindfulness with you. But when we weave our mindful habits into our daily routines, they can help reduce stress and increase that bond of connection with whoever we are practicing with. So we'll talk about some different mindfulness practices in just a second that can help us be present. And you can find spots during your day that make sense to practice them together as a family or as a staff, or to practice individually. Those mindfulness practices can also help us to be calm. Being compassionate is a habit that all of us can benefit from, especially our students. Compassion is a skill that we can teach. And at the school level, reading fiction books is really powerful to increase compassion. Even as adults, reading fiction books helps us increase our compassion, but also doing compassionate acts for others. Maybe that's volunteering, doing a service learning project, or just having a conversation with someone who needs it. All of those things are ways to practice compassion, which we can do every day. Being grateful and reflecting are other habits that we can weave into our daily routines. For me, I practice these 2 together. I have a journaling routine that I do each day. Research shows that writing down 3 things that we are grateful for can reduce stress and increase happiness. So each day I just bullet out 3 things that I'm grateful for about that day. And I have mine in a little calendar, like one of those day planners. So it's just a little bit of space to bullet out those 3 points of what I'm grateful for. And then I also say what was the worst thing about the day and the best thing about the day, and reflect a little bit on that day. And that really helps me just be intentional about how the way I'm using my time is affecting my state of being. So we have to discuss the importance of healthy eating and sleep patterns, because the way that we treat our bodies directly affects the way that we feel. So here are some brain power foods. Berries, I like to put them in smoothies. Nuts and seeds, I always have a bowl of trail mix on my desk. Dark chocolate, I already told you that's in my fridge at all times. Whole grains, so choosing that whole grain pasta or bread over the white flour, that can be helpful for our brain. Cruciferous vegetables like cauliflower and broccoli and other vegetables like that, those are helpful to improve the way that our brain functions. Dark leafy greens, maybe making a smoothie with some or having a salad every once in a while. And then unsaturated fats like avocados and fish, those are also great for our brains. Soy products are also good for our brains. However, use those in moderation. And then sleep is essential to our well-being. I know that during the pandemic, because I didn't have to commute anywhere, I actually did start to get a little bit more sleep, and it's really improved my state of being. I just feel so much more able to handle things. And You know, you might have heard that if you don't get enough sleep, if you're sleep deprived, it's just the same as being drunk. Your brain is not functioning optimally. So do try to get sleep, because during sleep, our brains and bodies flush toxins, they repair neural pathways, they code and store memories, they process emotions, they repair muscles, and they fight illness. And adults should get between 7 and 9 hours of sleep. Oh, and sleep also gives our heart a rest, which it really needs to stay healthy. So now we have about 15 minutes left. So we're going to do some mindfulness practices to reduce stress. And while we're doing these practices, I'd love for you to also think about a point in your day that you might incorporate some of these practices. So again, put down what you're doing and be with us for this next few minutes. The first one we'll practice together is breath work. And research shows that our breath is integrally connected to our mental state of being and our emotional state of being. So when we take those deep breaths, not only do we come back to the present moment mentally, that monkey mind gets shut off, but it also changes our heartbeat, our respiration slows down so that our perspiration also slows down, and we're just able to reduce stress in the moment. So I've got a few different breathwork practices for you today. The first one is square breathing, and this one can be great for teens as well as adults, especially for folks who like to have a little tactile motion with their breath work. This is helpful. So you can use your finger to point right ahead, and we're going to breathe in through the nose as we count up to 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, moving your finger across, and hold the breath for a count of 4 as you bring your finger down. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you'll let it out through the mouth as we count down from 4. 4, 3, 2, 1. And then we'll hold our breath out, counting down from 4 as we bring our finger up. 4, 3, 2, 1. So I'll do that silently once, as you can watch with me, breathing in, holding, breathing out, holding. And you can just repeat that as many times as you need to come back to that state of calm, homeostasis, balance. Another one that I like to teach is called the SOS breath. And this is kind of a secret breathwork technique. I like to tell people you can do this one if you're in a meeting. Maybe your boss steals your idea and you get a little frustrated, but you don't want to show it. So you can do this and no one will be the wiser. So first you make sure that your feet are on the ground and you bring a slight smile to your mouth. You just breathe in through your nose and let it out through your mouth. And just keep doing that until you're calm. And then the last one that I like to teach people, especially parents, this one's really good for parents, is deep belly breathing. You can do this on your own, but if you have a little one at home who's starting to learn about mindfulness, you can place them on your lap and they can feel your belly getting bigger and smaller as you breathe in too. But right now, if we're all alone, we can just take our hand and place it on our belly and breathe in through the nose and blow that belly up like a balloon, getting as much air as possible into it, and hold at the top and then let it go, bringing your belly button back in to your spine and keeping that hand there to feel the belly move in and out. Oh, yes. Thank you, Jessie, in the chat. Jessie is sharing a great children's book called Alpha Breaths. That sounds great. And there's a YouTube version as well. Thank you for sharing that, Julie, or Jessie. So the next mindfulness practice we'll do together is yoga. And this is great at increasing that mind, body, and spirit connection. We talked earlier about the disruption that happens between that trifecta when we have toxic stress or trauma. So like we saw with animals shaking it off, we can't meditate away trauma. Meditation, when practiced regularly, can help us reduce our stress globally over time, but it really is not a way to release that stress. We really need movement to get the stress out of us. So yoga can be a really great way to complete that stress cycle and help reduce the trauma that is stored in your body. So there's lots of different types of yoga. The one that's the most popular in America is called Hatha yoga. This is probably, if you've practiced yoga at a studio, this is the most common type. There's flows, you're moving pretty much the whole class, and it's more energizing usually. Another type of yoga is restorative. That's the type that's much more calming. The lights are often low. The teacher is using a very quiet, soft voice, and the poses don't necessarily give you any kind of fitness benefits. They're really meant to reduce your stress. Then we have trauma-informed yoga, which is a really specific way of doing yoga with the intention of healing trauma. This is much more about connecting the breath to movement, much more about completing that stress cycle, not concerned with alignment of the body whatsoever, but really just there to help heal from trauma. And chair yoga can be any kind of combination of that, just done in your chair for a quick stretch and reset. So let's do a very brief chair yoga sequence together. So you can bring your hands out in front of you like this and cross them over at the elbows, and then bend the elbows, and you can bring the backs of the palms together. You can even wrap around if you like for a little deeper stretch. And then just bring the elbows down towards the belly button. This is really great if you have been sitting at a computer for a long time, because this stretches out the shoulder blades in the back and the neck. Go ahead and lift those elbows up, uncurl yourself, bring your arms out, and switch so that the other elbow's on top now. Bending at the elbow, maybe bringing the backs of the hands together, maybe wrapping a little bit more to bring the palms towards each other. Then bring those elbows down. You should feel a deep stretch in the back of the shoulders. Then go ahead and lift those elbows up and uncurl. We're going to inhale our arms up to bring our hands above our head and lean back just a little. And then we'll exhale and bring the arms to give ourselves a nice big squeeze, a big hug. Then inhale again, bringing the hands above, leaning back in our chairs. And exhaling, hugging again, switching which arm is on top. And then you can either bring your hands down to your knees or onto your desk. And we'll take our right hand and we'll reach up to the sky and then start to twist, turning around, grabbing the back of our chair and just looking over that right shoulder. Then coming back to the center. This time reaching up to the sky with our left arm, turning around, grabbing the back of our chair and looking over that left shoulder. That was just about 3 minutes, but getting our necks and our shoulders all stretched out, that can give us a nice little reset in the middle of the day when we're feeling lethargic or tense. The next mindfulness practice is meditation, and this comes with a caveat. If you are actively experiencing trauma, this can be a little more difficult to access, but done over time, especially if you're new to meditation, doing it with some guidance, perhaps an app that has guided meditation or joining a meditation community, can be really powerful, and it can help increase calm and a sense of presence. There's lots of different ways to meditate. One of the most popular ways is visualization. I know Headspace and the Calm app have a lot of great visualization meditations that can take you to a different place and bring you to a state of calm. You can also just come up with your happy place and use those 5 senses to really design where you feel happiest. And then you can access that on your own at any time to come back to a state of calm. Another way to meditate is using affirmations, which is really, really helpful if you are trying to overcome a fear or you have a sense of worry or self-doubt over something. So putting your where you want to be in the present tense. So saying, I am a competent communicator, and repeating that several times can help build your confidence. And you might even want to place that on a Post-it note and stick it somewhere where you see it often so that you can do your affirmation whenever your inner critic does start to pop up. And then various religions have different ways of doing prayer and to engage in a state of meditation. So that's something you can do on your own, or you can do in community with others. The last practice is a body scan, which goes a little bit further than the yoga, which helps us start to incorporate that mind-body-spirit connection and access it. But when we do the body scan, it really helps our muscles and our brains get into the same state of being. We don't have a lot of time, but I'd love to do an abbreviated body scan with you. So do put your feet back on the floor. If you feel comfortable, this one's a good one to do with your eyes closed. But if not, you can just find a spot to gaze at in front of you, or maybe gazing down at your nose. And go ahead and take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. And on your next inhale, I just want you to curl your toes up, clench your fist, and just tense up your ab muscles and any muscles you can. Just tense them up as you inhale. And then as you exhale, let them all go. Do that one more time. Inhaling, curling your toes, clenching your fist, tensing your muscles, and exhale, let it go. And then just start at the top of your head and just check in and see how your forehead's feeling. Maybe unfurrowing your brow, coming down to your mouth, unclenching your jaw, releasing the tongue from the top of your mouth, traveling down to your neck and your shoulders, giving your shoulders permission to relax, going down through the chest and the belly, checking to make sure everything's loose, traveling through the legs, down to the feet, just checking on how those are feeling. And taking another breath in and out. Slowly blinking open the eyes. And now I'm wondering how you're feeling now. Got the same options, the same 9 dogs. How are you feeling now? It's really helpful when we're practicing mindfulness, especially if we're new to it, to check in with our brains, our bodies, and our hearts at the beginning of a practice and again at the end. It can help us understand how impactful it was. And also, it's okay if it wasn't. It's okay if you feel exactly the same at the beginning or at the end as you did at the beginning. That happens too. Mindfulness is a practice because we have to keep doing it repeatedly over and over and over to see the true benefits. So it looks like we've got a lot of folks that are a blissful 4 or a joyful 6, but some other folks who are still quite tired. We're getting to the end of the day. I hope this gave you a little bit of relaxation and peace so that you can sleep well tonight. And I'm going to pass it back to my colleague, Martha. We don't have time for questions and answers, but please do email us if you have any.
Thank you so much, Dana, for that wonderful walking us through some of those practices. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's webinar. Our funding comes from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, which requires us to evaluate our services. Attendees providing their email address will receive an evaluation survey 24 hours after the close of today's event, along with today's slide presentation. The follow-up email will include links to request a participation certificate. We appreciate your honest, anonymous feedback, which will provide information to SAMHSA and assist us in planning future meetings and programs. Your feedback counts. We also hope that you make plans to participate in upcoming online activities presented as part of the Childhood Trauma Learning Collaborative, including the Family Compassionate Conversation series that is shown on your screen on June 23rd. Please do register for that. Those are wonderful conversations designed to support families and offer an opportunity for discussion. Please also feel free to check out our webinar, Practical Approaches to Compassionate Practices with Youth, in August. We'd love to have you, and we'd love to have you check out any of our other online offerings via our website. And I believe that that's it for the upcoming events, but here is a QR code for the evaluation. You can also access it through the link that Ingrid provided in the chat, and you will also have an opportunity to fill out that evaluation linked in the emails that we send you. If you want a certificate for attending, please do click the link that is contained in our follow-up email, and you'll also receive a copy of the slides from today's presentation. Also, we just want to thank you for being here, and if you have any questions for us, please contact us, either Dana or myself, via the email addresses that you see on your screen. And please also stay posted to our website for links to the video presentation, related slides, and any other upcoming events that we're offering. Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon.